The active U.S. military entanglement in the Middle East is actually preventing, rather than triggering, a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. To understand why this counterintuitive geopolitical reality exists in 2026, we have to examine the doctrine of how the United States sizes its armed forces. Following the Cold War, the Pentagon established the Two Major Regional Contingency, or 2MRC standard. 2MRC was a framework requiring the military to be sized, equipped, and forward deployed to fight and win two geographically separate conflicts simultaneously. This strategy had a proven historical precedent. During World War II, the United States successfully structured its industrial base and military deployments to prosecute simultaneous major combat operations against adversaries in both the European and Pacific theaters. Over subsequent decades, multiple administrations slowly degraded this benchmark. The 2MRC requirement was reduced to a one-war standard, where the military is designed to decisively defeat a single major adversary in one region, while merely holding a second adversary in check elsewhere. Today, this shift severely limits concurrent global deployments. The active fleet lacks the ship counts, munition stockpiles, and forward-deployed personnel required to sustain major, simultaneous campaigns in two separate hemispheres. This documented reduction in force sizing created profound anxiety among Indo-Pacific allies. It cemented the fear that a U.S. military distraction in one region automatically creates an unprotected strategic vacuum in another. That fear materialized with the 2026 U.S.-led and Israeli military campaign against Iran. This conflict currently consumes a massive volume of U.S. interceptors, precision strike weapons, and daily political bandwidth. The conventional strategic assumption suggests that with U.S. assets pinned down in the Middle East, a zero-war reality exists in the Indo-Pacific. Theoretically, this provides Beijing the perfect window of opportunity to launch a cross-strait invasion of Taiwan. The evidence points in the exact opposite direction. Empirical observation of the Iran conflict is actively forcing the People's Liberation Army to reassess and delay its invasion timeline. Two specific domains are driving this reassessment. First, the conflict has demonstrated highly effective U.S. operational kill chains. Second, the crisis has exposed severe macroeconomic logistical constraints within China's own supply lines. Modern extended deterrence is no longer a simple volumetric accounting exercise of deployed ships and troops. Instead, it is defined by qualitative execution on the battlefield and the exposure of critical supply chain vulnerabilities. This chart tracks daily launches from Iranian territory. Following U.S. strikes, ballistic missile launches dropped 86%, and drone launches fell 73%. This wasn't achieved by passively absorbing salvos. Capacity plummeted because U.S. forces aggressively utilized offensive operations to suppress the launchers. This requires the rapid execution of kill chains. A kill chain is the sequential process of identifying, targeting, and engaging an adversary's assets in combat. Using electromagnetic blinding and algorithmic targeting, U.S. forces quickly collapsed Iran's command and control networks. The critical variable here for Beijing is the hardware. Iran actively relies on Chinese-made HQ-9B air defense systems to protect its domestic airspace. These static, mass-based Chinese systems failed to withstand systems-based, multi-domain electronic warfare attacks from U.S. forces. Watching their own exported technology fail under combat conditions undermines the PLA's confidence in their ability to maintain an A2AD bubble over the Taiwan Strait. A2AD, or anti-access area denial, is a strategy utilizing long-range missiles and sensors to prevent an opposing force from entering or operating within a specific maritime region. The offensive operations in Iran culminated in a decapitation strike against the regime's most senior leadership, including Ayatollah Khamenei. Executing a strike of this precision requires deep, active intelligence penetration. To pull this off, U.S. and Israeli forces had to synchronously blend geospatial tracking, well-placed human sources, and SIGINT. SIGINT, or signals intelligence, is information gathered by intercepting electronic communications and radar emissions. This operational reality directly challenges China's stated military doctrine. The PLA relies heavily on decapitating Taiwan's political leadership to coerce rapid capitulation before U.S. forces have time to arrive in theater. The assumption that a decapitation strike leads to immediate surrender is a massive sociological miscalculation. Assassinating a democratically elected leader in Taiwan is highly likely to steel civilian resolve to fight the occupiers, lavens and fracture the populace. The US and Israel have total intelligence dominance over Iran, yet still struggle to force a clean regime change in a fractured society. Xi Jinping must recognize the near impossibility of achieving it in a unified, highly motivated Taiwan. Any sustained PLA amphibious invasion across the Taiwan Strait requires an absolute prerequisite: immense, continuous, and secure energy logistics. This map shows the Strait of Hormuz bottleneck, passing millions of oil barrels daily. Tracking these flows through the Malacca Strait reveals a stark dependency. Half of China's imported energy relies on this route, a vulnerability Beijing calls the Malacca dilemma. China has attempted to bypass this maritime vulnerability, but overland pipelines from Russia and through Pakistan lack the volume capacity to replace sea transit. CPEC is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a bilateral infrastructure project aimed at connecting China's western region to the Arabian Sea. The threat profile here is highly asymmetrical. Iran's parliament threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz in retaliation barely impacts the US, which relies on Hormuz for less than 10% of its oil. But for China, a closure is an existential threat. This creates a hard logistical paradox. China cannot exploit a US military distraction in the Middle East because that exact conflict threatens to choke off the fuel lifeline the PLA requires to wage war in the Pacific. Beyond energy, there is a second macroeconomic constraint: Taiwan's disproportionate dominance over the global semiconductor value chain, specifically in advanced assembly, packaging, and testing. This segmented bar chart breaks down global semiconductor manufacturing capacity. Taiwan is responsible for over 60% of the world's contract chipmaking capacity and over 90% of the advanced cutting-edge nodes. The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, or TSMC, operates the fabrication plants that serve as the hyper-concentrated physical choke points for this entire global supply chain. The immediate financial fallout of a cross-strait conflict would be severe. If these facilities went offline, it would trigger an estimated $500 billion loss in electronics manufacturing globally. This reality creates a semiconductor self-deterrent. Capturing Taiwan by force inherently destroys the fragile, highly skilled fabrication infrastructure that China's own domestic tech sector desperately needs to survive. The demise of the U.S. two-war strategy is a genuine vulnerability. However, using it as the sole metric for U.S. power projection is a critical analytical failure. Modern deterrence rests on two pillars. The first is qualitative execution. U.S. electromagnetic blinding and kill chain efficiency actively offset quantitative platform shortfalls in theater. The second pillar relies on macroeconomic dependencies. SLOCs act as passive restraints on pure adversaries. SLOCs, or sea lines of communication, are the primary maritime routes used for trade and logistics, like the Strait of Malacca. Deterrence in 2026 relies on this complex interlocking matrix of operational capability and supply chain fragility, rather than the isolated ship and troop counts of the Cold War era. For Indo-Pacific allies like Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, the execution of the Iran campaign should bolster, rather than degrade, assurance in American technical supremacy. Ultimately, the PLA is not viewing the U.S. entanglement in the Middle East as a momentary lapse in global security waiting to be exploited. The U.S. campaign in Iran serves as a stark warning to Beijing. It proves that American multi-domain lethality remains fully intact, while simultaneously highlighting the PLA's own grim logistical vulnerabilities.